She also told me about the gold rush in 1848. The people in California at the time had sort of planned it to wait to sign the treaty to reveal that there was the biggest lode of gold in the history of the world in California. And when they found all that gold, they needed people to mine it, so they brought Mexicans up to mine it. And as soon as they got all that gold out of the hills, they sent the Mexicans back. We just celebrated the Day of the Dead the other day. There's so much to learn from I'm just sharing with you a little bit of what I learned from the Mexican culture. But all of the groups that are coming into this country, there's so much to learn. What did the Irish give us, and the Germans, and the Scandinavians, and all these people as they came, and now have lost their culture? But at least when they came here, they gave us something. And now the Mexicans are giving us this beautiful celebration, the Day of the Dead celebration. What do we do with Halloween? We teach our kids to put on plastic masks and beg for candy. In Mexico, the Day of the Dead celebrates the ancestors, honors the people who have gone before them, and talk about death with the family. Traveling around as a storyteller, I've been to many different schools. I've been in 30 states in the last 3 years. And everywhere I go, I see the differences in the education that is out there. And it's a little confusing to me. I was in Cincinnati last year, where the kids in 5th grade get little laptop computers. They can plug into the internet anywhere in the school, in the hallways, the bathroom, in the classrooms. The teachers will have them plug into and get their lessons as the teacher is teaching from the blackboard. And I was in a school in New York City this past fall where a kid came up to me. It was around this time in November, and he says, "Man, this school is messed up. Here it is November, and I still got to share my textbook with Ernie, man. They haven't got his textbooks yet. Man, Ernie stinks, man. He's stinky. You should smell that kid, you know?" And now we're all listening to this guy talk. His name was Domingo. And Domingo was talking, making us all laugh. And he said, "You know, man, it's like I get up in the morning, I got to think, am I going to take a dump in school today? Because if I am, I need to bring toilet paper into school, you know?" And we all were laughing. And I thought he was kidding until the next day when I had to go to the bathroom. And in my unscientific observations as I travel through this country, it seems to me that the schools that are the poorest, and the schools that don't get textbooks on time, and the schools that have the textbooks from the 70s, these are the schools that are mostly brown and black schools. And the schools that are the richest and best prepared and most wonderful are the all-white schools. And I've learned from Laurent and Sue that this isn't just by accident. It's not just because this is what happened. This was designed. This was on the books earlier. Not so long ago were these laws on the books. And this makes me sad. I don't know what to do about it. I can just tell you the story of what I see. As I've been traveling around, I've been listening to immigrant stories, other immigrants. In 1994, there was more problems in Cuba, and a bunch of Cubans began to come to the United States. And the people who had money would come over in a plane, or they would come over in a motorized boat, but those who didn't still wanted to leave Cuba so bad that they would make rafts. They would jump on the rafts and paddle out to the Gulf Stream and take the Gulf Stream 90 miles to the United States, if they were lucky. If they were not lucky, they missed land and ended up in the middle of the sea. I have a picture in my home of a man in an inner tube with a bottle of water and a knife floating to the United States. Can you imagine coming to this country with just that, not even the language? And I met a man from Guatemala who left Guatemala when he was 15 years old to come to the United States. Why did he leave Guatemala? Because of the Civil War. It was terrible. The war was horrible. There were atrocities committed there that are almost unspeakable. And who helped fund that war? The United States. We were fighting communism at the time, but still, we were part of the problem that created this mass of people coming up to the States. So he walked. He got rides with some trucks. He got on some trains, but a lot of the time he walked. It took him many months. He finally got very close to the border. The last thing between him and the United States were miles of desert. And he wasn't sure that he was going to make it, but he started to walk. And he walked until finally he felt that he was going to fall over and die when this car pulled up behind him and gave him a ride across the border. And the man, this angel of a man, gave him $2, dropped him off in the McDonald's. And the boy went to McDonald's and got a burger and a Coke. And for 10 years, he worked in this country, always worried that they would send him back to Guatemala. And after 10 or 15 years, he finally got his citizenship here in the United States. This is one small story of these immigrants coming to the States. When I first started storytelling about 6 years ago, I called a friend of mine and told him that I was doing it. His name was Colin. He's this mountain man. He lives in Colorado, literally in a tree house. And he reads poetry and writes stories, and he's really an incredible man. When I told him I was telling stories, he said, "Oh, wow, that's great, Antonio. I believe that storytelling can change the world." I was like, "Oh, okay, Colin, go eat some more granola, kid," hung up the phone. But I thought about what he said. And I thought that if I knew your story, you become special to me. And if you know my story, then we fight for each other. And I remembered in 3rd grade, Larry Sargent was the class bully. He was held back 2 years because he was so stupid, or that's what everybody thought. And the smallest kid in class was Binky Minor. He was promoted because he was so smart. Larry was pushing Binky all around. It was just Binky's turn to be picked on. But something in me that day snapped. I looked and I realized that this just didn't make sense. And I walked up to Larry and I came up with a really good idea. I said, Larry, you should pick on someone your own size. He was like a 5th grader. He should have gone and fought a 5th grader. But Larry didn't understand that logic. He said, okay, and started shoving me around instead of Binky. And now all my friends were looking, and I got a little hot, and I got a little, like I was going to start fighting, and I started to punch him, and that felt really good, and he started to punch me, and then he picked me up, held me in the air, and slammed me on the ground like some bad wrestling move. All the air went out of my body. I felt like I had died. I was like, and when my air came back, I looked up at him, and I said the worst thing I could think of. You jerky, jerky, jerk, jerk, jerk. And the teachers came and broke us up and took us inside, and we got major detention, which meant we had to sit after school for 2 hours, look out the window, and think about what we had done. And that day after school, I was looking out the window thinking I stood up to the class bully and how great that was. And I was looking over at Larry, and Larry looked like he had tears in his eyes. And I was looking at him, and soon he started to cry. And I was like, Larry's the sissy. I couldn't wait to tell everybody. And then he started to sob. His shoulders were going like this. Snot was coming everywhere. I was like, Larry, what's wrong? What's the matter? When he stopped crying, he looked at me and he said, well, this is my 3rd major detention. It means I get kicked out of school now. And I was like, I got the class bully kicked out of school, you know? I was like, woo! But then he said that he was going to go home and his father was going to beat him. And that didn't make sense to me. When I got in trouble, I got grounded. I said, you mean you're going to get grounded? He said, no, my father's going to hit me in my face, keep me out of school till my bruises heal, and then put me in another school. That's why I'm so far behind. And I felt so ashamed to be the one to send Larry home to a beating from his father. And if I had that moment back on the playground, I wouldn't have picked a fight with Larry. All I could see was the red side of his hat, the red hat of anger, and the red hat of being a bully. What I didn't see was the black hat of sorrow and frustration behind that. And if I had known his story, it would have been different that day. But it's not just enough to know someone's story. You have to ask the question, why is the hat there in the first place? Who put it there? What are they gaining by having that hat there? Are we going to let this hat divide us? Or are we going to find out about that hat and make this world a better place today and tomorrow and next year and the year after that and the year after that and the year after that?